The entire city was dark. No power anywhere. In a conference room on the 14th floor, a homeless woman stood in front of the country's most powerful CEO and his team of engineers. Her clothes were torn and dusty. Her hair was messy. She smelled like the streets. The CEO looked her up and down slowly. Then he smiled. Not a kind smile. A cold, mocking smile. The woman's voice was calm and clear as she looked him straight in the eye. "Sir, I can fix this." The whole room exploded with laughter. The engineers laughed. The CEO laughed the loudest. Someone slapped the table. Someone else shook his head like he'd just heard the funniest joke of his life. A homeless woman? Fix a problem that the country's top engineers couldn't solve? Impossible. Ridiculous. Absolutely insane. But 2 hours later, that same CEO stood at the base of a 50-meter tower, his arms crossed, his face frozen in shock, watching that homeless woman do the impossible. Nobody was laughing anymore. Who was this woman? How did someone living under a bridge save an entire city? And what happened when the whole country found out the truth? This is the story of Grace. Before we continue, please hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like on this video, and comment below where you're watching from and what time it is in your country. We read every single comment. Now, let's get into the story. Grace is 28 years old. Every single night, she sleeps under the Woos Bridge in Abuja. Her pillow is an old torn bag. When she wakes up before sunrise, before the city even opens its eyes, she uses water from bottles she finds in trash bins to wash her face. Her clothes: a faded shirt full of holes. Trousers that used to be brown but are now the color of dust. Sandals held together with wire. Her hair is always tied back the same way, messy and rough. People walk past Grace every single day. Thousands of people. But nobody looks at her. Nobody asks her name. To them, she is invisible. Like a stone on the road. Like a shadow on the wall. But here is what nobody knows about Grace. Before everything fell apart, Grace was not always homeless. She was a student. A brilliant student. She studied electrical engineering at a university in Abuja for 3 years. She was there on a scholarship, a full scholarship, because her brain was sharp like a razor. Grace could look at a circuit board the way you look at a picture. She understood how electricity works. How it travels from the big power stations, through those giant steel towers you see on the highway, through thick wires hanging high above the ground, all the way into your house so your light bulbs can shine and your fan can spin. She knew the whole system. Like someone who knows every road in a city without needing a map. But then, everything changed. Her mother got sick. Very, very sick. The hospital bills came. One bill. Then another. Then another. They swallowed all the money Grace had saved. They swallowed the money from selling her textbooks. They swallowed the money from selling her laptop. Grace's father had already died years before. She had no uncle with money. No auntie to borrow from. No rich friend to call. So Grace did the only thing she could do. She dropped out of school. She used her scholarship money to pay the hospital. She sold everything she owned, even her bed, even her clothes, to keep her mother alive. But her mother died anyway. And after that, Grace had nothing left. No house. No school. No family. No money. Not even 1 naira in her pocket. She ended up on the streets of Abuja. The same city where she had once dreamed of becoming an engineer. The same city where she had walked to class every morning with books under her arm and hope in her heart. Now, she slept under a bridge. But here is the thing about Grace that nobody understood. Her mother was gone. Her school was gone. Her house was gone. But her brain never stopped working. Every night under that bridge, Grace would pick up old newspapers from the trash and read them. If there was an article about electricity or machines, she would read it twice, 3 times, until she understood every word. And when she found broken things, old radios, small fans, phone chargers that people threw away, she would fix them. Not to sell them. Not to make money. She fixed them because her hands needed to stay busy. Because her mind needed to stay sharp. Because fixing things made her feel like herself again, even just for a moment. The other homeless people started calling her the fixer. If your phone charger stopped working, you brought it to Grace. If someone's small radio made a strange noise, Grace would listen to it for 2 minutes and tell you exactly what was broken inside. She never asked for money. She never said no. She just fixed things quietly and handed them back. That was Grace. The girl nobody saw. The girl everybody ignored. Until the day the entire city went dark. It was a hot Tuesday morning in Abuja. Suddenly, with no warning, the electricity went out. Not just in one house. Not just in one street. The power went out across the entire city. Every single light. Every single fan. Every single air conditioner. Gone. Traffic lights stopped working. Cars crashed into each other at junctions because nobody knew whose turn it was to go. Hospitals started screaming for their backup generators to turn on. Banks shut their doors and locked their customers inside because the security systems went dead. The big shopping malls went completely dark. Restaurants lost all their frozen food. People got stuck inside elevators between floors, banging on the walls and shouting for help. By noon, the whole of Abuja was boiling. Not just from the heat. From anger. At the headquarters of Nova Power Nigeria, the company that controls all the electricity in Abuja, the CEO was pacing back and forth in his office on the 14th floor. His name was Mr. Gerald Cole. Tall man. Expensive suit. Shiny shoes. Big office with leather chairs and a view of the whole city. His phone had not stopped ringing for 3 hours. The Minister of Power was calling. The President's office was calling. Angry governors were calling. News reporters were already outside the building with their cameras, shouting questions at anyone who walked past. Gerald was sweating. Not from the heat. From pressure. He called all his best engineers into the big conference room. "Find the problem," he said, his voice hard like stone. "Fix it. Now." His engineers opened their laptops. They pulled up digital maps of the entire power grid. They sent drones into the air to fly over the city and look at the power lines. They made phone calls to technicians at different stations across Abuja. After 2 hours of sweating and shouting and typing and checking, they finally found it. The problem was at Transmission Tower 7. Tower 7 was a massive steel tower standing about 50 meters tall, that's as high as a 15-story building, on the edge of the city. At the very top of that tower, inside a small platform, 3 of the biggest, heaviest power lines in the whole country came together and connected. And one of the main connector clamps had cracked. It had slipped loose. Let me explain this in the simplest way possible, so even a child can understand. Imagine electricity is like water flowing through a big pipe. Now imagine there are 3 big pipes carrying water to the whole city, and they all meet at one place, Tower 7, where they join together into one even bigger pipe. When that joining point cracked and came loose, the water could not flow anymore. The electricity stopped. Everything after that point went dark. The entire grid was like a road where someone removed the only bridge. No cars could cross. No traffic could move. Gerald's engineers now understood the problem. But fixing it, that was a completely different story. To fix the clamp, someone had to climb all the way to the top of Tower 7, 50 meters in the air, and reconnect it by hand. There was no elevator. The ladder was old and bent in some places from a storm that had hit the city last week. And because the power lines were dead and the clamp was loose, any wrong move up there could cause the lines to swing and hit whoever was climbing. They could get seriously hurt. They could even die. Gerald sent for his best field technician, a man named Raymond. Raymond was tough. He had been climbing towers for 15 years. He had fixed things in thunderstorms. He had worked through the night in dangerous conditions. But when Raymond looked at the photos of Tower 7, and then looked outside at the wind picking up speed, he shook his head slowly. "Sir," Raymond said, "we don't have the right replacement parts here. The supply truck is coming from Kaduna. That's at least 6 hours away. And climbing that tower in this wind, without the right tools—" He paused. "We could lose a man up there." Gerald slammed his hand on the table so hard that everyone in the room jumped. "Then we wait for the truck," he said. 6 more hours. 6 more hours of darkness for the entire city. People were going to be furious. Outside the Nova Power building, a crowd had started to gather. Journalists with cameras. Angry residents shouting. Government officials stepping out of big black cars with tinted windows. And somewhere at the edge of that crowd, standing quietly in her torn, faded clothes, was Grace. She had walked all the way from Was Bridge. That's almost an hour on foot under the hot sun. She walked because she had heard people on the street talking about the power outage. And something inside her brain, that part of her brain that never stopped working, had already started thinking about the problem. Even before she fully understood what was happening, her mind was already trying to solve it. She pushed through the crowd slowly. People bumped into her. Some people wrinkled their noses at her smell. But Grace kept moving forward until she was near the front entrance of the building. A security guard in a blue uniform stopped her immediately. He put his hand up like a wall. "Move back," he said. "You can't be here." Grace looked at him calmly. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Please," she said. "I know what is wrong. And I know how to fix it." The guard laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that says, "You must be crazy." A journalist standing nearby heard Grace and smirked. Someone in the crowd said loudly, "This woman has been in the sun too long. Someone take her to the hospital." Grace did not move. She did not shout. She did not get angry. She just stood there with her arms at her sides and said it again, simply and calmly. "I know how to fix it. Please let me speak to someone inside." Now, this is where something small, something almost like a miracle, happened. A junior staff member inside the building, standing near the glass door, saw Grace through the window. Maybe he was curious. Maybe he was bored. Maybe he just thought it would be interesting to see what this woman had to say. Whatever the reason, he went upstairs and told someone. And that someone told someone else. And the message traveled up, floor by floor, until it reached the 14th floor where Gerald was sitting in his conference room, surrounded by tired engineers and unanswered problems. Someone knocked on the door and said, "Sir, there's a woman outside. She says she can fix the problem." Gerald looked up. He was in a terrible mood. His jaw was tight. His eyes were tired. "What woman?" he asked. A homeless woman, sir. She's standing outside. She says she knows how to fix it." For a moment, the whole room went quiet. Then Gerald smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who wanted to laugh at something ridiculous. "Bring her up," he said. "I want a good laugh." When the elevator doors opened and Grace stepped out onto the 14th floor, people stared. She walked down the hallway slowly, her dusty sandals making soft sounds on the shiny tile floor. Her torn shirt. Her faded trousers. Her messy hair. When she walked into the big conference room, the room with the long table and the leather chairs and the huge screen on the wall showing the power grid map, every single engineer in that room went silent. Not because they respected her. No. They were silent because they were shocked. Shocked that someone like her was standing there at all. Gerald looked her up and down. Slowly. Like he was examining a strange thing he found on the street. Then he smiled that cold smile again. Grace stood in the middle of the room. Her back was straight. Her voice was calm and strong. "Sir," she said loudly, looking directly at Gerald, "I can fix this." The whole room exploded with laughter. The engineers laughed. Gerald laughed the loudest. Someone slapped the table. Someone else shook his head and muttered something under his breath. But Grace did not look down. She did not look embarrassed. She walked straight to the big screen on the wall, the screen showing the entire power grid of Abuja like a giant spiderweb of lines and dots. She pointed at one spot on the map. Tower 7. Nobody had told her where to look. Nobody had explained anything to her. But she pointed right at it. "Your problem is here," she said. "At the junction clamp on Tower 7. The clamp cracked, probably from the storm you had last week, and the connector slipped. The 3 main lines lost their connection point. That is why the whole grid went down." The laughter stopped. Like someone had pressed a pause button on the whole room. Raymond, the field technician, leaned forward in his chair. His eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" he asked quietly. Grace turned to him. "Because this," she said, pointing at the map, "is the only single point where all 3 major power lines cross. If the problem was anywhere else, on any other part of this grid, only part of the city would be dark. But the whole city is dark. So it has to be the junction. And if the problem was inside the wires themselves, an internal fault, your computer system would have flagged it electronically. But it didn't. That means the fault is physical. Something came loose. And in a storm, the most likely thing to come loose at a junction like this is the clamp." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Gerald sat up slowly in his chair. His deputy leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Gerald's eyes stayed on Grace, watching her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Fine," he said. His voice was different now. Not mocking. Not laughing. Just serious. "Let's say you're right about what's wrong. Our engineers already told me we can't fix it without the replacement clamp. And that clamp is 6 hours away in Kaduna. So what exactly are you going to do about that?" Grace reached into the pocket of her torn trousers. She pulled out a small, worn notebook. The kind you buy at a roadside shop for 50 naira. The pages were bent and dirty. She flipped to a page covered in her handwriting. Numbers. Diagrams. Notes. "You don't need a new clamp," she said. "Not right away. The crack is not in the clamp body itself. It's in the bolt mechanism that holds the clamp tight. The clamp itself is still strong. You just need to reseat it, put it back in the right position, and hold it in place with a temporary binding. Steel wire. The right thickness. Wrapped and twisted at the correct tension. That can hold the junction stable long enough to restore power. It won't be permanent, but it will work until your replacement parts arrive." Raymond stood up from his chair. He walked over to Grace and looked at her notebook. His eyebrows went up. "That," he said slowly, "that could actually work." "It will work," Grace said, her voice steady and sure. "I've done this before. On smaller lines, yes. But the principle is exactly the same." Gerald stared at her. Really stared at her. Like he was trying to figure out who this woman was. Where she came from. How she knew these things. "You've done this before?" he asked. "Who are you? Where did you train? What school did you go to?" And so Grace told them. She told them about the university. The scholarship. Her mother getting sick. The hospital bills. Dropping out of school. Losing everything. Ending up on the streets. Sleeping under the bridge. Fixing things with her hands just to keep her brain alive. She told them everything. Simply. No drama. No tears. Just the facts of her life, quietly delivered in that big conference room full of men in expensive suits. When she finished, the room was very, very still. Gerald looked at Raymond. Raymond looked back and gave a single, slow nod. Gerald turned back to Grace. He took a deep breath. "All right," he said. The word came out slowly, like it was hard for him to say. Like he was not used to saying it. "All right. Let's do it." 1 hour later, Grace was standing at the base of Tower 7. She was wearing an orange safety harness they had given her. It was too big for her small body, so they had to tighten all the straps as much as they could. In a bag on her back, she carried the tools she had asked for. Heavy pliers. Steel wire of a very specific thickness, the exact number she had written in her notebook. A wrench. A length of rope. These were simple tools. The kind you could buy at any hardware shop in Garki Market for a few thousand naira. Raymond stood at the bottom with 3 other technicians. They had their radios, their safety equipment, their serious faces. Gerald had driven out from his office himself. He was standing a little distance away, his arms crossed, watching. The tower was enormous up close. 50 meters tall. Made of thick steel beams crisscrossing like a giant ladder reaching into the sky. The wind made it groan softly, like a sleeping animal. The ladder going up was narrow. Steep. Some of the rungs were bent from last week's storm. Grace looked up. She could see the small platform at the very top, so high it looked like a toy. She took one slow, deep breath. Then she began to climb. The crowd that had followed the Nova Power vehicles from the city watched in complete silence. Journalists pointed their cameras up. People stood with their hands over their mouths. Some people were praying quietly. Grace climbed steadily. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. Like someone who had made a decision and was now simply doing what needed to be done. One rung. Then another. Then another. The higher she went, the stronger the wind became. Halfway up, maybe 25 meters in the air, the wind suddenly pushed hard against the tower. The whole steel structure shook. It vibrated with a deep, low hum that you could feel in your bones. Grace stopped climbing. She pressed her body flat against the ladder. She held on tight and waited. Below, people gasped. Someone shouted, "Come down! It's too dangerous!" But Grace did not come down. She waited for the vibration to pass. And when it did, when the tower went still again, she kept climbing. Higher, 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 until finally, she reached the top. The platform at the top of Tower 7 was small. About the size of a large dining table. Just a metal grate with a railing around the edge. Grace clipped her safety harness to the rail. She stood up carefully and looked out. All of Abuja stretched beneath her in every direction. She could see the city rooftops, the roads with their cars standing still in traffic, the hills in the far distance. The sky was huge and blue and endless. And above her, hanging heavy and silent in the air, were the 3 massive power lines, thick as a man's arm, coming together at the junction point. Grace found the clamp immediately, right where she said it would be. The bolt had cracked under the pressure from the storm. The clamp had shifted sideways, breaking the connection between the 3 lines. Grace opened her bag. She pulled out the wrench first. Below, Raymond lifted his radio to his mouth. "Talk to me, Grace," he said. "What do you see?" Grace's voice came through the speaker, calm and clear. "I can see it. The clamp is exactly where I said. Give me 15 minutes." She went to work. First, she used the wrench to push the clamp body back into its correct position. This was not easy. The clamp was heavy. It had shifted far to the side. Grace had to use both hands and the weight of her whole upper body to move it. Her arms shook. Sweat ran down her face. But she held on. Slowly, very slowly, the clamp moved back into place. Then she reached into her bag for the steel wire. She began wrapping it around the clamp in a very specific pattern, crossing it back and over, twisting it tight, section by section, like lacing a shoe, but with much more strength. Each twist she made with the heavy pliers, pulling hard until the wire bit firmly into the metal and held. Wrap, twist, pull, check, wrap, twist, pull, check. The wind came again. Stronger this time. The platform swayed beneath her feet like a boat on water. Grace crouched low. She kept one hand on the clamp. She waited. The tower groaned. The wind howled past her ears. Then it passed. Grace stood up and continued working. On the ground, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Gerald stood with his arms still crossed, his jaw tight, watching the small figure at the top of the tower working with quiet, steady hands. Someone in the crowd started praying out loud. Other people joined in. 14 minutes later, Grace's voice crackled over Raymond's radio. "Raymond," she said, "it's done. The clamp is back in position and the wire is holding it. You can run a test." Raymond looked at his team. They nodded. They ran the test sequence from the mobile unit, sending a small signal through the lines to see if they were connected again. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, one by one, every traffic light in the section they were watching flickered. Then came on. Then, from across the city, area by area, street by street, the lights returned. Air conditioners kicked back on. Generators shut off. Horns started honking in relief. The sound of the city coming back to life rose up like music, like a celebration. Raymond grabbed his radio. He looked up at the tower, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Grace," he said, and his voice was not steady anymore. "It worked. The whole city is back online. You did it." At the top of the tower, 50 meters in the air, with the wind in her hair and the whole city stretching beneath her, Grace allowed herself one small smile. Then she clipped her bag shut and began the long climb down. By the time Grace's feet touched the ground, the journalists were already running toward her. Cameras. Microphones pushed into her face. Questions flying at her like stones. "Who are you? What's your name? How did you do that? Are you a Nova Power engineer? Where did you learn this?" Grace stood there, dusty and sweaty and tired, and looked at all the cameras calmly. "No," she said. "I'm not an engineer. I live under was bridge." The silence that followed was the loudest silence of the whole day. People's mouths fell open. Cameras stopped moving. Even the journalists who asked questions for a living had no words. Gerald pushed through the crowd. He walked right up to Grace and stopped in front of her. Up close, without the big conference table between them, without his expensive office around him, he just looked like an ordinary man. A man who had just seen something he could not fully understand. He reached out his hand. Grace looked at it for a moment. Then she shook it. "I laughed at you," Gerald said. He did not say it like someone making a speech for the cameras. He said it quietly, like someone who was embarrassed and ashamed. "I'm sorry." Grace nodded once. She did not look angry. She did not look proud. She just looked very, very tired. Gerald turned to Raymond. "Get her whatever she needs," he said. "Food. Clean clothes. A place to stay tonight. A hotel. Whatever she wants." He turned back to Grace. "And I'd like to talk to you tomorrow. Properly. If you're willing." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded again. The story of Grace spread across Nigeria that night like wildfire. By morning, her face was on every single news channel. People were talking about her on radio shows. Her photo was everywhere on social media. The picture of her climbing down from the tower, dusty and exhausted, with the whole city's lights shining behind her. Some people cried when they heard about her mother. Some people got angry at all the systems that had failed her, the schools that didn't help, the government that didn't care, the people who walked past her every day like she was invisible. Some people just shared her photo with one simple caption: "This woman restored power to an entire city with her bare hands." The next day, Grace met with Gerald again. This time, it was in a clean meeting room. There was food on the table, real food, hot food, and Grace ate it without shame or embarrassment. She was hungry. She had been hungry for a long time. Gerald sat across from her. He had a folder in front of him. Papers. Documents. "Grace," he said, "I want to offer you something." He slid the folder across the table. Inside was a job offer. A full-time position at Nova Power as a field solutions consultant. A real title. A real salary. Benefits. Insurance. Everything. But that was not all. "I'm also going to pay for you to finish your degree," Gerald said. "Full sponsorship. We'll cover your tuition, your books, your accommodation. No strings attached. You go back to school. You finish what you started. And when you graduate, you come work for us." Grace stared at the papers. Her hands started shaking. "And there's one more thing," Gerald said quietly. He slid another document across the table. "This is a bank transfer confirmation. 40 million naira. It's yours. Right now. Today. Use it to get yourself a house. Buy clothes. Food. Furniture. Whatever you need to live comfortably. To live with dignity. You've earned it." Grace looked at the number on the paper. 40 million naira. She had been living under a bridge. Eating from trash bins. Wearing the same torn clothes for months. And now this. Her eyes filled with tears. Not sad tears. Overwhelmed tears. The kind of tears that come when something impossible suddenly becomes real. She put her face in her hands and cried. Deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere very deep inside her. Gerald did not say anything. He just let her cry. When Grace finally looked up, her face was wet but her eyes were clear. "Thank you," she whispered. "I promise. I will never disappoint you. I promise." Gerald smiled. A real smile this time. Not the cold one. Not the mocking one. A warm, genuine smile. "I know you won't," he said. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and drop a comment below telling me what you learned from Grace's story. Turn on your notifications so you never miss stories like this. We have more powerful stories coming your way. See you in the next one.